Hello, my name is Markus Manninger, CTO and founder of Drone Rescue Systems. We are providing parachute recovery systems for virus drone between 3 and 25 kilograms.
Hi everyone, I'm Greg from Pilot Institute. We train drone pilots all over the country.
Hi, my name is Haye from PiXL, where we cover all the drone news on our website.
Welcome to the latest episode of the PiXL Drone Show, our weekly podcast where we talk to industry professionals about what they do in the UAS space.
From professionals who use drone to fly inspection missions to public safety users or even drone light shows, you will learn on the PiXL Drone Show that drones are much more than just toys. Let's go. Hey, how are you?
Sounds good. Good. What's going on?
Nothing much. Getting ready for DJI Airworks, I guess. Leaving this Sunday, so that's coming up soon.
Yep. Yeah, I'll be leaving on Monday morning, heading over there, driving. I'm not a big fan of Vegas in general, just the city. It's a bit too many people and too much stuff for my personality, but I enjoy the fact that I don't have to fly there. So I can just get in my car and drive. That's a much better thing. I mean, I would have to drive an hour and a half to Phoenix. I would have to leave super early before anything happens. And then, so I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah. I drove there once a couple of years ago, but from New York, it's a very long drive. So I'm looking forward to flying this time.
It is a very long drive. Well, today we are talking about parachute systems. We'll bring our guest in a minute onto the show, but it's interesting. You know, we used to hear a lot more about parachute companies out there doing things, and then I think it's been a little quiet. So we'll be asking our guests some questions about how this applies. They're based in Austria, which is really cool. We'll hear kind of maybe a difference in what the regulation is in Austria and in Europe in general based on the parachutes. We met with them at UAV Expo, and one of my employees was really impressed with what they were doing. So we'll talk to them about that. What are you looking for the show today?
I'm definitely curious to see how this system works. I was looking on their website, and they say it seems like they have a different method of deploying the parachute. So I'm kind of interested to learn how that exactly works and what drone models it applies to. And also, since the company is based in Austria, does this work throughout Europe? Is this approved? And more importantly for us here in the US, is it FAA approved? So yeah, I think we have a list of questions, and excited to get started with this one.
Cool. All right. Well, let's bring Markus into the show. All right. Markus is joining us today from Austria. And Markus, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. It's my honor, definitely.
Well, we are always interested in talking to people that do something different, and your company does definitely something different for the drone industry using parachutes. Before we start digging into all the details, can you tell us how you got into kind of the drone industry and interested in drones and this technology?
Sure, definitely. I mean, everything started in, I think it was 2013, where a friend of mine started doing video photography with his drone, and like these were really the early days, so there were quite a lot of crashes. And by that time, I was working on a university project, and I'm a paraglider by myself, so I'm always using to have my reserve with me, and we just combined the idea of trying to detect if a drone fails and combine it with a parachute, and that's how everything started. And yeah, that was already 2013.
Yeah, and things were a little different in 2013, right? I mean, many more drones would fly away and crash into stuff, and luckily now things seem to be much more improved, and drones have come a long way and are definitely a lot safer. What was involved in starting a company in Austria that caters to the drone industry, and what are some of the challenges that arose when you started the business?
I think it's with every business. Like when you start with an idea, you need to find out if there's a market, if there are potential customers. And 2013 was really also in terms of regulation. It wasn't clear where the path will direct to. But anyway, it was an idea, and I founded it together with a friend of mine. And in 2017, we got an investment from an Austrian investor, and that's how everything started. So just an idea, and give it a try, and keep on working, keep on improving, I would say.
So your system is a little bit different than all the other systems I've seen before or even tested here in our office. It doesn't use pyrotechnics to deploy the parachute. Can you talk about one, the reason why you decided to go with this approach, and then two, how does it work, and why is it different than anything else?
Yeah, you're right. Like the way we actually deploy the parachute, and I brought some unit with me. This is the one that will be installed on a DRS M300, for example. And we're only using those rubber bands to actually deploy the parachute. So it's like a catapult trigger mechanism. You push it in manually, and it will be released when there is any kind of malfunction detection. So I think the idea is quite nice because it's very easy to use. Whenever you have explosive, people are afraid of using it, even CO2 driven deployment systems. And at the end, there is no need to have like an explosive on the drone just to deploy the parachute. So it really works perfectly with those rubber bands, and they're very lightweight. You replace them from time to time, and basically that's why it's also very competitive when it comes to the weight. And at the end, this is something we really took care of to make it as lightweight as possible, because at the end, like, you're using the parachute just in case, and you want to make money with your payload and don't want to waste the payload for a parachute.
Yeah, I love the idea of not having to replace this pyrotechnic thing every single time. That's definitely a big plus. Now, you mentioned malfunction detection. Do you use speed sensors or how does it know to deploy? Let's put it this way.
Yeah, basically here in the base, so there's a little space where our electronic is embedded. So we came up with our own electronic boards. We do development of electronics and software in-house as well. So yeah, I mean, we have our parametric pressure sensors, we have our IMU sensors, and some other sensors, but mainly we are monitoring the flying behavior of the drone. So since this device will be mounted on the drone, it does exactly the same movement. And using those sensors, you can do an attitude estimation and see, okay, and set a limit. If it banks more than, for example, 55 degrees, that's definitely abnormal. And that's one of the triggers to deploy the parachute. And same as descent rate, we're monitoring yaw rate and various other parameters as well.
So your system doesn't connect or communicate with the drone itself. It monitors the drone's behavior, and if it breaks through any parameters, it deploys the parachute. Is that
exactly? Yeah. From the beginning, we took care that that the parachute works totally independent from the drone. Mm-hmm. So we're not relying on any sensors or any data coming from the drone, because that's exactly what we want to cover. So in any kind of malfunction, even like if you have a power supply loss and you don't get any data from the drone, you should still be able, or the DRS is still be able to deploy and actually work in any kind of scenario.
So how far does a parachute need to be shot away from a tumbling drone mid-air, let's say, in order to be able to deploy safely and not get tangled up in arms, legs, props, and what have you?
Yeah, I mean, like, it really depends on where it's located. So you try to keep it away, like usually you try to shoot it upwards, and you try to keep it away from the props. Usually we deploy, like for the DRS M300, for the M300, we deploy it about 3 meters. And that's exactly like the length of the lines. And then as soon as they get stretched, the rest is done through when the canopy fills up with air. And that's basically how it inflates. So it doesn't really matter how strong you eject it. At the end, it's just the air that inflates the canopy that brings the drone down in a safe manner.
What are some of the clear benefits of not having to use pyrotechnics in order to get that parachute launched away or deployed away from the drone? I mean, it sounds like this system with elastic bands is a lot more simple and also easier, I guess, to reset once it's used.
Yeah. As mentioned before, I think people don't want to handle with any kind of explosives or dangerous components, and like we have done a lot of testings. Of course, like within the product development, you do a lot of deployments, real scenario deployments. In the meantime, we have gone through several ASTM testing standards, and it really proved to be reliable. And even like also those rubber bands are strong enough to catch up, like to have a minimum deployable altitude of just like 15, 20 meters, really depending on the size of the drone. And so the performance is really good.
That's 15, 20 meters. That's really impressive. That's 50 feet for those of you that are not familiar with meters that are listening. What platform? You mentioned the Matrice 300. What other aircraft is this valid for?
So we have this also used for the M600 and basically any drone between 10 and 15 kilograms maximum takeoff weight. So we have a smaller one as well. So it's just a different size of the container. The shape is basically the same, but of course the parachute is smaller for smaller aircraft, and we have parachutes all the way up to 25 kilograms currently.
Wow.
And so if I was going to buy one of those systems from your site, can I just install this on my drone, or do I need any specific technical know-how, or is it straightforward?
I would say if you're a little bit into technology, it shouldn't be a problem, especially for very popular drones like the M300, the M600, and now we're working on a parachute for the M30. So for those, we really provide a plug-and-play system. So there comes a manual with all the instructions how to install it, with all the cords and all the screws and everything that's required for installation on one of those drones. Everything's included, and we barely have someone calling us because he got stuck in the installation. So it really works quite smoothly. And the good thing is when the parachute is installed, you can do a full check on the ground, like if the motor stops, if the parachute gets deployed, if there's an alarm buzzer, there's an LED showing the status. So you can really, after the installation, you really can make a full check before actually go out and fly.
You mentioned earlier that it triggers when you go to a certain altitude. Is there a way for the user to check and change these values as to when it's going to trigger, or is this pretty much you guys decide and that's it?
Basically, everyone that's not a problem. Part of the parachute is also like a small micro SD memory card. And that's exactly where a configuration is located on. It's a simple text file you can open with any computer, and there are just the values for those parameters. So for parachutes like the M300 and mentioned before, like the ones we already tested quite a lot, they already come pre-installed with parameters that fit quite well. But we also have customers with custom aircraft where we actually don't know what is the perfect parameter. So in this case, we disable the automatic deployment. The customer goes out flying as aggressive as possible, send us the data logs, and then we tell you, okay, this is the perfect parameter for your setup.
Wow.
But basically, everyone can change it if he wants, yeah.
Now, of course, something that's always on top of mind for many drone pilots is battery life and flight time. And of course, when you have different payloads and add weights to a drone, it affects how long the drone can stay in the air. How heavy is your system, and how does it typically impact the flight time for the drone models that you use it for? And is there any benefits when you compare your system to some of the competitors? I mean, is your system lighter and smaller, perhaps?
Yeah, I think when you compare our parachute with the competing products, like for example, the one for the DJI M300, it's 490 gram, and other competitors are almost like they are 920 grams. So it's almost half of the weight of competing products. I mean, there are other parachutes out there, they are not smart, so it's just like a deployment unit. They probably might be more lightweight than ours, but if you compare ours to others with the same features, we are almost half of the weight, and that's basically a big benefit that's what we get as a feedback from customers.
Do you think that would be feasible if you had a system where it's controlled by the operator with, let's say, a button that probably wouldn't work on their remote controller. No, never mind. You need an independent system.
I mean, what you're talking about is the manual triggering feature. So that's that's quite a standard nowadays for parachutes, and we also have one of those. So it's like it's a handheld device with two push buttons, and at least in Europe, it's also required. So you need to be able to stop the aircraft from like flying away using one of those manual triggering devices. You can also trigger it via the remote controller from the drone, but it's always more safe to have a separate control link, which is independent from the control link you actually control the drone, because this is exactly what we want to do. Is like in any, like if there's a scenario where the flight controller wouldn't react anymore and you're not able to steer to control the drone anymore, then probably the trigger button will also not work. And this is why you have like a separate device. Yeah. And it's in Europe, it's also required. Yeah.
Do you, and I know this might be a biased answer because you sell these, but do you think these should be mounted on all drones, whether a version of this or something small? Do you think parachutes belong on all drones?
Yeah, I would love to see them on every drone, of course, since we're selling them. I think we need to defer. It doesn't make a sense to like put a parachute on a drone that's 250 grams. There's just not enough impact energy when it crashes on the drone on the ground. But in general, I think if we are going towards more high risk application, I'm talking about package delivery or in general flight over people or flight beyond visual line of sight. It is already required to have a safety device like a parachute installed for specific application. And I think that's what it will be in the future as well. For some scenarios, it will be required. For others, not.
Yeah. Is your system like what Apple does, designed in Austria, but then manufactured elsewhere? Or is it designed in Austria and also built in Austria?
Yeah, I mean, we are still a small company. So we source the components, I would say, around the world, especially like the electronic components. They are from everywhere, but we still do assembly and do the final test, and everything is still done in-house. Yeah.
Okay.
What's the price tag on these models?
It's something between like the smaller ones. They start around 2,000 all the way up to 5,000 euros.
All right. And so when new drones come out, I mean, I'm using Apple again as an example. When new iPhones come out, typically the people that make the accessories for those new models get some of the specs and information already beforehand. If DJI is working on, let's say, an DJI Inspire 3, would you guys already get the details of that drone so you can start working on the next parachute? Or is that, do you have to wait for the drone to come out and only then you're able to get to work?
Yeah, sadly, we don't have such a good connection to DJI. We are in good contact with a lot of distributors, which are also selling our products. So sometimes they get demo units in the early stage, and we are able to get them just for a few days to take some measurements and just think about where we could place the parachute. But mainly we need to wait till the first ones are available for sale. And that's where we actually start working on new parachutes for new drones. And DJI keeps us busy, definitely. Like they launch so much products this year.
I was just hoping I would have found a new source for like rumors and news in Austria, but
yeah, we're also looking for that one. So if you have a source, just please let me know.
I knew Haye was fishing for information about the Inspire 3.
Of course.
So let's talk about the regulatory standpoint here. And I know you're in Europe, which is different. Can you tell us in Europe, when is such an equipment, and you've kind of talked about this a little bit already, but when is such an equipment required on a drone when you fly in Europe?
Basically, like the EASA, the European Air Safety Association, they released new regulations, and they were they are mandatory beginning 2023. Like there's a 2 years, like this year, and the last one was already like a transition phase where pilots could apply according to the existing or to the new rules. But in general, the EASA is following the SORA standard. It's a safety operation risk assessment. So at the end, you need to, when you apply for permission, you need to describe, okay, what's the aircraft looks like, where's the area you are flying, and you're ending up in various risk levels. And with a parachute, you have the option to lower the risk, and then you are able to operate the drone in an area where it would not be possible without a parachute. So there's not like a common thing which requires you to have a parachute installed. It really depends on the application. And I think it's the same like in the US. You have the 107 waivers, which is used by a lot of our customers when they want to fly above people by own visual line of sight. It's already quite mandatory to have a parachute installed.
So 2 weeks ago, you were at UAV Expo in Vegas. Can you tell us a little bit about your plans to enter the US market, and if it's any different than selling the products in Europe?
I mean, we are already, like, we have done shows, like I have been to the Commercial UAV Expo 3 years ago, but we didn't have our own booth. We were with one of our customers. So we are already penetrating the market kind of for a while. But since this year, we have one of our employees is living part-time in the US. So he doesn't have a permanent visa yet, but he's like half of the year, he's already in the States promoting our product. So we are already on that way. Yeah, usually we go on expos. We also come to the States to really do demos. So like last year, I've been in Texas, where a big police and fire department, they invited us for one of a local show, and I was there to do a demonstration, really go flying, deploy the parachute. And compared to Europe, I think what we can see is that the US market is a little bit ahead, I would say, because the regulatory is already more defined. Like there's still a lot of unknowns in Europe, and that prevents companies from really pushing the market.
Yeah. I think that's for anybody, whether they're drone manufacturers or selling accessories for drones. That's hard because like all the countries around the world and regions like Europe and North America, they all have different rules. And for the most part, I think they try to address the same concerns, but they have slightly different ways of going about it. And I can imagine in your position that might pose some extra challenges.
It's like I mean, we have this European regulatory framework, but there's also some way of interpretation that the local or the national civilian aviation authority can really change a little bit on that. So that's not a hard fixed plan. So it's always a little bit tricky. And we see it because we also help our clients to get permissions. So sometimes they are asking for strange paperwork we need to provide for one country, and the other one doesn't really ask for that. So there's not a strict parse you can follow currently.
So does that mean that you basically have to establish a relationship with the FAA as well in order to get customers and help them to get their drones approved for certain missions? Or
I mean, we are in contact with the FAA, but it's not that easy to find the right person which is responsible, for example, parachutes. In the US, there's this ASTM standard, which is already a good way for us as a manufacturer. We know, okay, we need to follow these standards. These are the requirements. These are the testing procedures we need to go through. So it's much more easier. And this ASTM standard is also widely accepted in Europe as well, I would say. But at the end, like even in the US, like we provide the parachutes and the documentation to customers. And if they have special requests, of course, we're happy to do more testing and stuff like this as well.
Yeah, ASTM is definitely the way to go. That's a recognized standard pretty much nationwide. So who are your customers? Are they individual people that buy this? Are they enterprise companies that have a large fleet of drones? Who do you sell to?
Yeah, we are mainly in the B2B business market. So we have a few single pilot customers. but mainly we are working with resellers or larger companies that have a fleet of drones. And we are also now involved in a few drone delivery projects, which is very exciting for us since they are like our perfect customer. They are flying in a high risk environment, and they need the parachutes, and they also need it on a bigger quantity.
Yeah. So in the United States, over the last couple of years, we've seen a new group of drones that emerged called the BlueUAS, the blue drones. And in order to get your drone approved for blue drones, you have to meet a whole range of requirements. And this started with the Department of Defense. But what we've seen happen now is that many larger corporations that need drones tend to favor the blue SUAS as well, because they're so vetted and pre-qualified, if you will. If you mount one of your systems on a blue SUAS drone, do you know if that drone would still qualify, or are you guys working to get your system approved so it can be used on blue SUAS drones?
Yeah, I mean, I can totally confirm this. Like even on the expo in Vegas, a lot of people are asking for blue SUS, and we already started looking into that. And like we don't have all the papers ready now, but we don't see any reason why we are not ready for the blue UAS.
Yeah.
You talk about paperwork. I'm wondering in the back of my head, who's easier to work with as far as paperwork, the European authorities or the FAA in the US?
That's a tricky question. It's a little bit hard to say because we are more or closer involved with European customers. So I'm much more into the EASA stuff than in the FAA stuff. Hard to say. Like I cannot tell actually.
If you were in charge of drone regulations in Europe, what would be the thing that you would change that would allow businesses like yours to grow better, faster? Like, what's the biggest hurdle that you currently run into?
I mean, I also need to tell a little bit what we had experienced with our customers, because we don't actually go through the registrations with our drones, but we see that the main problem is that there is no clear way. So there's not a one specific thing. There's still a lot of open questions. There's no one path to get your approval. There are still a lot of individual things you need to provide from case to case. So it's hard to tell the one and only. There are a few things, but like in Europe, I know they are working on that. It took a while to come up with the new regulations, and of course they're not perfect yet. I hope this will get better in the next few years, and probably in a couple of years we have this clear path forward to this registration.
Yeah. So the FAA recently has switched to the categories of drones, category 2, category 3, and category 4. Primarily category 2 and category 3. None of these drones currently exist in the US. As we're recording this, these would allow people to fly over moving vehicles and flying over people. And you mentioned that you have some customers that are using Part 107 waivers, which I think are slowly going away to be replaced by category drones. Do you think a parachute, whether it's yours or somebody else, do you think a parachute is going to be required to be mounted kind of permanently on top of a drone in order to qualify as category 2 or category 3 in the US?
Yes, definitely. I think so, because in these categories, there is already a maximum impact energy specified. So you could even like have a very tiny and small drone, which limits you in terms of payload or features in general. So if you want to get these permissions with bigger drones, I think there is no other way than using a parachute. And also, you need to ensure, like using a propeller guard, that you're not able to harm people on the ground. And this will also be covered with our parachutes, because we switch off the engines before the parachute gets deployed. So whenever the drone comes down, it will be in a safe manner, slow enough to stay below required impact energy, and the propellers will also not rotate. So we are definitely working on that. So this would be the ideal solution. Like if we could provide a parachute for a specific aircraft, and we know like if you install this on your drone, you're getting permission according to Category 2, and you're able to fly. But we're working on that. But the main problem is that the limits for the kinetic impact energy, they are so ridiculously low that it's really hard to, even with a parachute, to bring it down that slow.
That's interesting. That was actually going to be my next question, because I'm sure you guys deal with kinetic energy measurements all the time. What is there such a requirement in Europe? And I should know better than not knowing the rules in Europe, but is there a kinetic energy requirement? And if so, what is it? Or you mentioned that it was extremely low in the US. What do you think is a reasonable number compared to what the US has?
In Austria specifically, but it's also very common in Europe to have a maximum kinetic impact energy of 80 joules.
80, wow.
So this is also a number that's already spread out around Europe, which is definitely doable. But if you have an aircraft that's 25 or 35 or even heavier, the parachute needs to become really, really big. And if the parachute is too big and you have a little bit of wind impact, then you have more forward speed than downward speed, and then the impact energy is rising again. So it's a little bit a trade-off. I think it should not only be the impact energy, because when we do testing with a parachute, like it's very clear that when the parachute deploys, it's a really big fabric. So it's easy to see. It's usually it has like ours are mainly red canopy, so it's very visible. We have an audible sound that starts beeping when the drone is coming down on the parachute. So it's not only about really the impact. I think it's also about like getting people that aware. That there is something coming down on them, kind of, yeah. So and this is something I'm really missing. It's not only like to nail it down on one number, it should be more involved.
Do you think the parachute system still works for much larger drones, like cargo drones, where you imagine that's, let's say, an Amazon drone flying between different warehouses with many kilos of payload? Do you think it would still work for those kind of drones if we ever get to see those?
Yes, definitely. I mean, like in the manned aviation, they also use parachutes for smaller aircrafts, and they are, I don't know, couple of 100 kilos, I would say. So it's just a matter of size of the parachute. And of course, like the bigger the parachute is, the more altitude it requires to fully inflate and open. But at the end, it's there shouldn't be any limit.
Would that still work with the rubber band deployment system that you have, or would you at that point start to look for different solutions, perhaps?
Yeah, I would say this is. We are already working on like custom projects with bigger parachutes, and what we usually do is we are switching to two-stage deployment system. So we're still using our current parachute that gets deployed, but that's just a guide chute that pulls out a bigger one. Mm-hmm. So with this setup, you can still use the rubber bands. If you want to have a single parachute that needs to get deployed and that's a few kilos, you probably need to come up with some stronger mechanism.
Yeah, interesting. As far as purchasing the device, are you planning on having some kind of dealership in the US or selling directly to the customer? How does it work actually right now in Europe?
Yeah, I mean, even in the US, and we have a lot of resellers in Canada. The list is not on the website currently, but it will be published soon. So we do both. You can really contact us straight and we will sell you the parachute, but you can also go to your local reseller and order it via them. And we already have a lot of resellers in Europe and US as well.
Awesome. That sounds exciting. I mean, now that we're getting towards the end of the interview, one of the questions we always ask the people that we interview on this show is, and this should be fun for you perhaps as well, since you've tested so many different drones. What is your favorite drone to fly? If you were going to take, let's say tomorrow, it's weekend, and you're going to fly a drone, which one would you pick?
I would take one of my FPV drones, actually. That's the most fun.
I can imagine.
I mean, we do a lot of test flying. Currently, we have the Alta X sitting in our office. so even the big ones. But when it comes to drone flying, I prefer my small freestyle quads.
Follow-up question on that, actually. I mean, FPV drones becoming more and more popular, and what we've seen as well, especially in the movie industry, is that they're starting to use FPV drones with relatively large cameras and lenses. And not only are they heavy, but they're also expensive. Have you guys sold any of your parachute systems to people that fly those kind of drones, or?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, the typical FPV drone pilot, like they even take the GoPros apart to save the weight of the case. So I would say that the standard FPV pilot doesn't want to have any additional equipment that's not really required. But as you said, like there are FPV drones that are quite big and carrying red cinema cameras. That would make sense. Yeah.
Yeah, those are definitely worth saving. Although I can imagine if you have an auto trigger system that's setting the right parameters for that parachute to be deployed on an FPV drone might be a bit of a challenge, I guess.
That's why I was asking earlier if you could change the parameter, because that was in my head thinking about FPV drones using.
I mean, it like of course if you start doing loops or something like this, you probably should deactivate all those features, but since our parachutes are so flexible, you can really you can set the maximum banking angle to 90 degrees and just take care you don't overshoot. And even like all the other trigger parameters, you can switch some of them off. We also have geofence feature where there is a GNSS receiver built inside of the parachute. And if you have a flyaway, it will stop the drone by using the parachute. So that would definitely work, or maximum descent velocities. Yeah.
So
that would have helped. Sorry, go ahead, Greg.
No. I was going to say you could also use that controller, the MacGyver looking remote controller to trigger it from a distance. This thing, yes. Yeah. That would be that's the toy I want to play with. I just want to have that and get it going.
Yeah. Both Greg and I are going to be in Las Vegas next week for DJI Airworks. But a few years ago, there was a guy who launched a drone. I believe it was from a parking garage. So there was already interference right there. And he lost control. I believe it was a Phantom 4. He lost control of the drone, and the drone stayed airborne, but slowly drifted into the airport and landed. I think it was on the strip there. So your geofencing parachute system, would have saved that guy and a lot of other people a lot of headaches.
That's exactly, and containment is also a big issue in Europe. So you really need to take care that you're only flying in that area you are allowed to. And this is why we came up with the idea have a separate GNSS module built inside of the parachute. So also with a GPS, we wanted to be independent from the aircraft. And a flyaway is exactly one of those situations where it's really hard to detect if it's out of control, because it's still flying. So it doesn't overshoot in terms of banking angle. It's really smooth flying, but you probably cannot control it anymore, and it starts flying away. And if it's going towards an airport, that's probably the worst case. And therefore, our geofence option is the choice to go to. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, Markus. Well, we really appreciate your time, especially on the Friday evening for you. I know it's getting late over there, and we really appreciate you joining us and sharing all of this. Where can people find more information about the system?
It's the best choice is to go on our website, www.dronerescue.com. There are email and telephone number. Just send us a request over the website. We are happy to be part of projects. So we do a lot of assistance for customers. So even if the product is not specifically mentioned on our website, just give us a call or send us an email. We are happy to come up with our ideas and to get it integrated.
Any plans on being at a trade show in the US anytime soon?
We thought about going to the DJI show, but obviously I think it's not possible for us due to time conflicts. I think that's it for this year. We'll definitely be at the UAV Expo in Vegas again. And we have also done the the other one in Florida, I think so. The
UVSI Exponential.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
It's in Denver this year, so early
we
next
have
year.
been there, and we're also trying to do 1 or 2 shows in Europe as well. So yeah, and we'll see.
It's a lot of work to be at trade shows. So
the real question is, Greg, do you still need trade shows when you're on the PiXL drone show?
no, that's right.
Yeah.
You don't.
Hopefully not. Like we'll see. next week we get all the requests from the website. Probably. No, it's always good. Like I really enjoyed being in Vegas, and the nice thing is, like, even we are from Europe, we already have a lot of customers in the US, and it's really so fantastic if you walk around the booth and you know already those most of them are already customers of ours. So that's also a way to get in to get personal contact. And usually you meet on the evening, you go out, have a few drinks, and that's something you cannot do. You can only do if you meet in person, and that's also one of the reasons why we like to go to shows. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, especially the last couple of years with COVID, I think all of us have missed the face-to-face contact that you have when you go to expos and conventions. But thanks so much for being on our show. I mean, we definitely promote safe and responsible drone flying, and I think parachutes make a lot of sense. So it was awesome to kind of hear your story, pick your brain, ask all these questions, and learn more about your parachute system.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me here. It's always a pleasure for us, and we're seeking for attention online. I think your show is the best opportunity for us, and easy talking in an interview. That's perfect. So thank you very much. Thanks for your time as well, and see you next time. I would say.
Thank you, Markus.
Thank you. Our pleasure.
One of the shows. We'll see.
All right.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye.